Across the galaxy, in every cantina, trading post, and military academy, the same stories circulated like cosmic dust, tales of a mythical species called humans. They were described as bipedal creatures from a backwater world called Earth, supposedly capable of impossible feats, surviving in environments that would kill most species, fighting with a fury that defied logic, and worst of all, refusing to surrender even when facing certain death. The Galactic Council had classified these stories as folklore, nothing more than spacer tales told to frighten recruits or entertain crowds. After all, no species could be that reckless, that stubborn, or that dangerous. The universe had rules, and even the most warlike races followed them when survival was at stake. But folklore has a way of becoming reality when you least expect it. When the hegemony invasion fleet darkened the skies above 1,000 worlds, when their unstoppable war machines began systematically exterminating entire civilizations, the galaxy's greatest military minds calculated the same grim conclusion: resistance was futile. The smart species surrendered quickly, the proud ones fought briefly before seeing reason. Then the humans arrived. And every myth, every impossible story, every tale dismissed as fiction, suddenly became terrifyingly, gloriously real. Commander Zethkar of the Vorthan Space Navy had seen 3 decades of service, fought in 7 different conflicts, and earned 17 commendations for tactical excellence. Nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for the transmission now crackling through his ship's communication array. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel Indomitable. You are approaching our patrol sector. State your intentions immediately. The bridge fell silent. Zethkar's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of deep confusion among his species. His tactical officer, a young Vorthan named Kesra, turned from her station with an expression of bewilderment. Sir, our sensors show no vessel in the projected location of that transmission. Whatever is broadcasting appears to be using stealth technology beyond our current understanding. Zethkar activated the ship's main communication channel. Unknown vessel calling itself Indomitable, this is Commander Zethkar of the Vorthan patrol ship Vigilance. We are responding to distress signals from the Kepler guy. 442 system. Our intentions are humanitarian in nature. A brief pause followed before the response came, and when it did, Zethkar noticed something unsettling in the alien voice. It carried an undertone of controlled aggression that seemed barely contained.
Commander, our sensors show massive energy signatures approaching Kepler.
442. These match the profiles of hegemony dreadnoughts. Are you aware that this system is under invasion? We received distress calls approximately 6 hours ago, Zethkar replied, his voice maintaining the formal tone required by Vorthan military protocol. However, our intelligence suggests the hegemony fleet won't reach this system for another 2 standard days. The laugh that came through the speakers was unlike anything Zethkar had ever heard. Bitter, knowing, and somehow terrifying in its implications.
Commander, I'm afraid your intelligence is outdated.
The hegemony arrived 4 hours ago. The Kepler colonies have been under bombardment for the past 3 hours and 47 minutes. Kesra's hands flew over her sensor controls, recalibrating and cross-referencing the data. Her face went pale as the readings confirmed what the mysterious voice had told them. Sir, she's correct. I'm detecting massive energy discharges consistent with hegemony plasma bombardment. The signals are being masked by some kind of interference pattern I've never seen before. Zethkar felt the familiar weight of command decisions settling on his shoulders. The Vigilance was a patrol vessel, armed with standard defensive systems, but certainly not equipped to engage hegemony forces. Their standing orders were clear. In the event of hegemony contact, retreat immediately and report to Fleet Command. Captain Chen, this is most disturbing news. We must withdraw and alert our Fleet Command. Perhaps in 3 or 4 days, once a proper task force is assembled. Commander. The interruption was sharp, cutting through his words like a blade. Are there civilians down there? Yes. Approximately 2 million beings across 17 different settlements, that the hegemony's technological superiority makes any rescue attempt. Commander Zethkar. The voice had changed, becoming harder somehow, carrying an authority that seemed to transcend military rank. This is not a request. You will provide us with the current tactical situation, including enemy positions, fleet strength, and defensive capabilities. You will do this now. The presumption was staggering. Zethkar's military training rebelled against taking orders from an unknown contact, but something in that voice suggested that refusing might be inadvisable. Captain, with respect, I cannot share tactical information with an unidentified vessel. Furthermore, any engagement with hegemony forces would be suicidal. Their technology is centuries ahead of anything in this sector. Commander. The voice was now eerily calm. Let me explain something about humans. We have a saying, the only easy day was yesterday. Another one is, never leave a fallen comrade. 2 million civilians are not falling on our watch. So I'll ask one more time. Current tactical situation. Now, Kesra looked up from her console, her expression troubled. Sir, I'm detecting multiple ships decloaking around our position. The stealth technology is unlike anything in our databases. On the main display, shapes began materializing out of the void. Zethkar's breath caught in his throat as he counted them. 12 vessels, ranging from destroyer-class ships to what appeared to be a massive dreadnought. The designs were unlike anything he'd seen, angular and aggressive, with weapon arrays that seemed to cover every available surface. How did they? Kesra began, but her words were cut off as new data flooded her senses. Sir, these ships, their energy readings are off the scale. The power output from their reactors exceeds anything in our technical manuals. And their weapons, she paused, double-checking her readings. Sir, some of these energy signatures don't match any known technology. Captain Chen's voice returned, and now Zethkar could hear the sound of activity in the background. Voices calling out coordinates, the hum of charging weapons, the controlled chaos of a military vessel preparing for battle. Commander, you're looking at the 3rd Fleet, Earth Defense Force. We've been tracking hegemony movements in this sector for the past 6 months. While your people have been debating response protocols, we've been preparing for war. Zethkar found his voice, though it carried a tremor he couldn't quite suppress. Captain, your fleet is impressive, but the hegemony forces in that system include at least 6 dreadnoughts and an estimated 40 support vessels. Even with your advanced technology, the odds are insurmountable. Commander, let me share something else about humans. We've never been good at math when it comes to impossible odds. Kesra, transmit current hegemony positions to our fleet. Sir. Kesra looked to Zethkar, who found himself nodding despite every instinct screaming against it. As the tactical data flowed from the Vigilance to the human ships, Zethkar watched in fascination as the alien vessels began moving into formation. Their coordination was flawless, like a predator pack that had hunted together for years. Captain Chen, even if your technology is superior, you're still outnumbered 3-1. Military doctrine suggests. Commander. The voice cut him off again, but this time there was something different in the tone. Something that might have been amusement. Human military doctrine is a bit different. We have this concept called acceptable losses. We also have another concept called unacceptable outcomes. 2 million dead civilians falls into the second category. The human fleet was accelerating now, moving toward the Kepler system with a speed that defied conventional physics. Zethkar's sensors struggled to track their movement as they approached velocities that should have torn the ships apart. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, aboard the Indomitable. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Primary objectives, neutralize hegemony fleet elements and establish safe corridors for civilian evacuation. Secondary objectives, gather intelligence on hegemony technology and tactics. Remember, people, today we show the galaxy what humans do when someone threatens the innocent. The response that came back over the communication channels sent a chill down Zethkar's spine. Dozens of voices, speaking in unison with an intensity that seemed to vibrate through the hull of his ship. Hurrah! As the human fleet disappeared into jump space, heading directly toward a battle that conventional wisdom said they couldn't win, Zethkar found himself staring at the empty space where they had been. Sir, Kesra whispered. What did we just witness? Zethkar was quiet for a long moment, considering everything he thought he knew about warfare, about tactics, about the cold mathematics of survival in a hostile universe. I believe, Tactical Officer, that we just discovered that some of the old stories might be true. The Vigilance hung in space, its crew watching their sensors as the human fleet emerged from jump space directly into the heart of the hegemony formation. What happened next would either be the shortest battle in recorded history or the beginning of something that would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. In the distance, energy signatures began spiking as the first shots were fired, and Zethkar realized that regardless of the outcome, the universe had just become a very different place. The myths were real, and they were angry. The hegemony fleet hung in perfect formation above Kepler. 442b, their massive dreadnoughts methodically reducing the planet's surface installations to molten slag. Supreme Commander Vextar watched the bombardment with the detached satisfaction of a being who had overseen the conquest of 47 star systems. The hegemony had perfected the art of intimidation through overwhelming force. Their dreadnoughts were mobile fortresses, each one carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Their smaller vessels moved in precise formations, creating overlapping fields of fire that no known technology could penetrate. The mathematical certainty of their superiority had never been challenged, until 12 human ships materialized out of jump space directly in their midst. Vextar's six arms gestured rapidly across his command console, bringing up tactical displays that showed the impossible. The unknown vessels had somehow bypassed every sensor array, every early warning system, every defensive protocol that the hegemony had developed over 3 centuries of conquest. Analysis, he barked at his tactical officer, a cybernetically enhanced hegemony drone designated as Unit 847. Ships are of unknown design and configuration. Energy signatures are inconsistent with any known technology. Estimated classification, 12 vessels ranging from destroyer to dreadnought class. Total fleet tonnage suggests they are either remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. Vextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Signal all ships. Target the unknown vessels. Let us teach these fools the cost of interfering with hegemony operations. The response was immediate and devastating, but not in the way Vextar expected. The human ships didn't retreat. They didn't attempt to negotiate. They didn't even try to establish communication. Instead, they did something that violated every principle of modern space warfare. They charged. The lead vessel, identified by its transmissions as the Indomitable, accelerated directly toward the hegemony flagship, its weapon systems lighting up with energy signatures that made Vextar's sensor operators double-check their instruments. Weapons fire began pouring from the human ship at ranges that should have been ineffective, but the plasma streams that lanced out were unlike anything in the hegemony's extensive database. The first shot struck the flagship's forward shields, and instead of the expected minimal damage, entire sections of the protective energy field collapsed. Alarms began screaming throughout the hegemony vessel as secondary explosions rippled across the hull. "How is this possible?" Vextar demanded. "Their weapons are cutting through our shields like they don't exist." Unit 847 cybernetic implants flickered as it processed the incoming data. Unknown weapon technology. Energy output exceeds theoretical maximums for vessels of that size. Recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup and analyze. The tactical officer's words were cut off as the human ship suddenly accelerated beyond all reasonable physics. One moment it was firing at long range, the next it was alongside the flagship, its weapon systems cycling through what appeared to be dozens of different weapon types. On the Indomitable's bridge, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The hegemony's reputation for invincibility was built on their enemies' willingness to fight by conventional rules. Humans had never been particularly good at following rules. Weapons, give me a full spread on the flagship's command section. Engineering, I want every drop of power we can squeeze out of the reactors. Communications, patch me through to the fleet. The response was immediate. All ships, Indomitable actual. Execute pattern Delta. I want those dreadnoughts neutralized before they can coordinate their response. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. The human ships moved with an aggressiveness that bordered on insanity, diving into the heart of the hegemony formation and engaging multiple targets simultaneously. Their tactics defied every principle of space warfare, treating their vessels like atmospheric fighters rather than the massive capital ships they clearly were. The destroyer Relentless screamed past a hegemony cruiser, its hull barely meters away from the enemy vessel's weapon batteries. As it passed, the human ship's weapon systems opened fire at point-blank range, sending devastating energy pulses directly into the cruiser's reactor core. The hegemony vessel exploded in a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded every sensor array in the vicinity. The heavy cruiser Defiant engaged 3 hegemony destroyers simultaneously, its weapon systems cycling through rapid-fire modes that shouldn't have been possible with the ship's apparent power systems. Each burst of energy found its mark with precision that suggested targeting computers beyond current galactic technology. But it was the dreadnought Indomitable that truly defied comprehension. Admiral Chen had positioned her massive ship at the center of the hegemony formation, where it was taking fire from 6 different vessels simultaneously. Convention wisdom said the ship should have been destroyed within minutes. Instead, the Indomitable seemed to be absorbing the punishment and growing stronger. "Admiral," called out the ship's tactical officer, Commander James Rodriguez. "We're taking heavy fire from multiple vectors, but our armor is holding. The ablative plating is actually improving our defensive posture with each hit." Chen nodded grimly. "That's what happens when you design ships specifically to fight the hegemony. Rodriguez, target their command ships. If we can disrupt their coordination, the smaller vessels will be easier to handle." The Indomitable's main weapon systems came online, and the space around the ship lit up with energy discharges that registered as small stars on distant sensor arrays. Each shot was precisely targeted, aimed not just at the hegemony vessels, but at specific systems within those vessels. Supreme Commander Vextar watched his fleet's tactical formation dissolve into chaos as the human ships carved through his forces with methodical precision. Every defensive measure the hegemony employed seemed to be anticipated. Every tactical maneuver counted before it could be properly executed. "How are they predicting our movements?" he demanded of Unit 847. "Unknown, Supreme Commander. Their tactical responses suggest detailed knowledge of our standard operating procedures and defensive protocols. It is as if they have studied our methods extensively." The truth was worse than Vextar could have imagined. Humanity had indeed studied the hegemony extensively, but not through espionage or captured intelligence. They had studied them by watching the systematic destruction of 17 different civilizations, taking detailed notes on hegemony tactics, technology, and psychology. And then they had spent 4 years designing weapons and strategies specifically intended to exploit every weakness they had observed. The Cruiser Vengeance demonstrated this perfectly as it engaged a hegemony dreadnought that outmassed it by a factor of 10. Instead of attempting to match the larger vessel's firepower, the human ship targeted the dreadnought's maneuvering systems, using precisely coordinated strikes to disable the massive ship's ability to rotate its weapons arrays. Within minutes, the hegemony dreadnought found itself unable to bring its main weapons to bear, while the much smaller human vessel systematically dismantled its defensive systems. The battle had been raging for 23 minutes when the impossible happened. The hegemony began to retreat. Vextar stared at his tactical display in disbelief as ship after ship reported critical damage and requested permission to withdraw. His fleet, which had never retreated from any engagement in 3 centuries of conquest, was being systematically dismantled by 12 ships that shouldn't have existed. Supreme Commander, Unit 847 reported, "We have lost 6 vessels with critical damage to 11 others. The unknown fleet has sustained minimal losses. I recommend immediate withdrawal to preserve remaining forces." For a moment, Vextar considered the unthinkable. The hegemony had built its reputation on the psychological impact of their invincibility. If word of this defeat spread throughout the galaxy, it could undermine centuries of carefully constructed fear. But as he watched another of his dreadnoughts explode under the concentrated fire of 2 human destroyers, he realized that preserving that reputation was no longer possible. The myth of hegemony invincibility had just been shattered by an enemy that fought like madness incarnate. All ships, execute emergency jump protocols. Retreat to Rally Point Omega. As the surviving hegemony vessels began their emergency jump sequence, Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the Indomitable. Around her, the crew worked with calm efficiency, monitoring the retreating enemy and coordinating damage control efforts. "Admiral," Commander Rodriguez called out, "enemy fleet is withdrawing. All hegemony vessels are jumping out of the system." Chen nodded, but her expression remained grim. "Time to target the surface installations? 47 minutes until we can establish secure evacuation corridors, Admiral. The hegemony bombardment has created significant atmospheric disruption. Then we wait. And while we wait, we send a message to every government, every military command, and every civilian authority in the galaxy." Chen turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel on all frequencies." The message that went out from the Kepler system that day was simple, direct, and would be remembered long after the battle itself had passed into legend. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Force. Today, the hegemony learned that humanity doesn't negotiate with genocidal maniacs. We don't calculate acceptable losses when innocent lives are at stake. And we don't retreat when the galaxy needs protecting. Earth stands ready to assist any civilization willing to fight for their freedom. But understand this. We fight to win, and we never, ever give up." As the message propagated across galactic communication networks, something fundamental shifted in the balance of power that had dominated the galaxy for generations. The hegemony could be beaten. Someone had just proven it. And that someone was a species that most of the galaxy had dismissed as myth. The news traveled faster than the fastest ships in the galaxy. Within 6 hours of the Battle of Kepler, 4.2, every major government, military installation, and civilian authority had received Admiral Chen's message. Within 12 hours, the recordings of the battle itself had been distributed across every communication network in known space. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. On Vorthan Prime, the Planetary Council convened an emergency session for the first time in 47 years. Chancellor Cathmore stood before the assembled representatives, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of uncertainty. "The recordings have been verified by our best technical analysts," he announced, his forearms gesturing to the holographic displays showing the battle footage. The engagement lasted 30 to 1 minutes and 14 seconds. The hegemony fleet consisted of 43 vessels, including 6 Dreadnought-class ships. The human fleet consisted of 12 vessels. The chamber erupted in voices as representatives demanded clarification, verification, and explanation. Cathmore raised his upper arms for silence. The tactical analysis is equally disturbing. The humans demonstrated technology that exceeds our current understanding in multiple areas: propulsion systems that ignore known physics, weapons technology that penetrates hegemony shielding with apparent ease, and most concerning of all, tactical coordination that suggests they have been studying hegemony methods for some time. From the gallery reserved for military observers, General Vaxstar rose to speak. "Chancellor, with permission of the Council, I would like to present our preliminary assessment." "Granted." Vaxstar activated his personal holographic display showing detailed schematics of the human vessels. The ships themselves represent technology that is both familiar and revolutionary. The basic principles are recognizable: plasma weapons, energy shields, jump drives, but their implementation exceeds anything in our databases. He highlighted specific sections of the recordings. "Observe the lead vessel, designated as the Indomitable. During the engagement, it sustained direct hits from 6 hegemony dreadnoughts simultaneously. Standard calculations suggest it should have been destroyed within 90 seconds. The display showed the human ship absorbing devastating firepower while continuing to fight with undiminished effectiveness. Instead, the vessel's defensive systems appeared to adapt to incoming fire. Our analysts believe they have developed some form of reactive armor that actually improves its protective capabilities when subjected to energy weapons." The implications are staggering. Chancellor Cathmore leaned forward in his seat. "General, what is your military assessment of this development?" "Sir, if the humans are capable of this level of technology and tactical sophistication, they represent either the greatest ally or the greatest threat this galaxy has ever seen. Their willingness to engage 43 hegemony vessels with only 12 ships suggests either remarkable confidence in their capabilities or a fundamental disregard for their own survival. Or both," added Representative Zuranis from the Civilian Oversight Committee. The recordings also show something else. When the hegemony fleet began retreating, the humans could have pursued and potentially eliminated the remaining vessels. Instead, they held position and began civilian evacuation operations. This suggests strategic thinking beyond mere technological superiority. Meanwhile, in the depths of space aboard the Dreadnought Infinite Conquest, Supreme Commander Vexstar faced the most humiliating moment of his 3-century military career. The holographic form of Hegemon Prime, the supreme ruler of the hegemony, flickered with barely contained rage. "Explain to me, Supreme Commander, how a fleet that has conquered 47 star systems was defeated by 12 ships crewed by a species we had never encountered." Vexstar's mandibles clicked nervously. "Hegemon Prime. The enemy demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded all projections. Their weapon systems, defensive technology, and tactical coordination suggest a level of preparation that implies extensive intelligence gathering. Are you suggesting that this unknown species has been spying on us?"
More than spying, Hegemon Prime.
"I believe they have been studying us. Every defensive measure we employed was anticipated and countered. Every tactical formation was met with precisely the appropriate response. It was as if they had fought us dozens of times before." The Hegemon's image leaned forward, its 6 eyes burning with cold fury. "Then we will give them the war they seem so eager to fight. Recall the 3rd, 5th, and 7th fleets. Begin mobilization of all reserve forces. If these humans want to challenge the hegemony, they will learn what 3 centuries of conquest has taught us." "Hegemon Prime, our intelligence suggests that the human fleet we engaged may represent only a small fraction of their total military capability. Perhaps a more measured response." "There is no measured response to defiance, Supreme Commander. There is only complete and total destruction. The galaxy will remember that challenging the hegemony leads to extinction." On Earth, deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, Fleet Admiral Marcus Thompson reviewed the tactical reports from the 3rd Fleet's engagement. The subterranean command center buzzed with activity as staff officers coordinated responses to hundreds of communications from across the galaxy. "Admiral," reported his intelligence chief, Colonel Sarah Kim, "we're receiving contact requests from 43 different governments. 18 are offering alliance proposals, 12 are requesting military assistance, and the rest appear to be attempting to determine our intentions. Thompson nodded grimly. Expected response pattern. What about the hegemony? Long-range surveillance assets report massive fleet movements in their core systems. They're mobilizing everything they have. Conservative estimates suggest they'll be able to field at least 300 ships within 2 months. 300 ships. Thompson considered this, against our current deployment of 60 vessels. Those are interesting odds. Colonel Kim looked up from her tactical display. Sir, the war games we ran suggested we could handle odds of 4 to 1, but 5 to 1 was considered beyond acceptable risk parameters. Colonel, those war games were based on conservative assumptions about our technology and pessimistic assessments of hegemony capabilities. Admiral Chen's engagement suggests we may have been selling ourselves short. Thompson activated the main holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with known fleet positions, supply lines, and strategic assets. What the hegemony doesn't understand is that they've just solved our biggest problem. Sir, for the past 4 years we've been preparing to fight the hegemony. The problem was that we had to rely on theoretical models and observational data. We needed real combat experience to test our systems and validate our tactics. Thompson smiled grimly. They've just given us exactly that. The display shifted to show human fleet movements throughout the galaxy. Signal all commands. Begin deployment of the 5th, 7th, and 9th fleets. I want them positioned in defensible systems with civilian populations. The hegemony is going to come at us with everything they have, and when they do, we're going to show them what happens when you threaten species that can't fight back.
Admiral, Colonel Kim hesitated before continuing. The diplomatic corps is requesting guidance on how to respond to alliance requests.
Some of these civilizations have substantial military assets that could be valuable in the coming conflict. Thompson was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. Colonel, transmit the following message to all requesting governments. Earth stands ready to assist any civilization committed to defending innocent life. We ask for nothing in return except the understanding that when we fight to win. If you can accept that human methods may differ from traditional warfare, we welcome your alliance. If you cannot, we understand and wish you well. Sir, that's quite direct. Colonel, subtlety is what allowed the hegemony to conquer 47 star systems, while the galaxy stood by and calculated acceptable losses. We're about to show everyone involved that there's another way to approach the problem. In the Kepler system, the evacuation efforts continued around the clock. The human ships had established defensive perimeters around the planet, while specialized evacuation vessels worked to transport survivors to safe zones. Commander Zethkar of the Vigilance watched the operation with growing amazement. Sir, reported Tactical Officer Kestra, the humans have evacuated 1.7 million beings in the past 18 hours. Their evacuation protocols are unlike anything I've ever seen. Through the viewports, they could see human shuttles moving in constant streams between the planet's surface and massive transport vessels that had arrived shortly after the battle. The efficiency was staggering, but it was the attention to individual needs that truly impressed the Vorthan observers. They're not just evacuating people, Kestra continued. They're evacuating families, keeping social groups together, providing medical care for the injured, and establishing temporary settlements that maintain cultural and species-specific requirements. It's as if they've done this thousands of times before. Zethkar activated his ship's communication system. Captain Chen, this is Commander Zethkar. If I may ask, how did your people develop such sophisticated evacuation procedures? The response came quickly. Commander, humans have been refugees more often than we'd like to admit. Our own history is filled with disasters, wars, and catastrophes that forced entire populations to flee their homes. We learned a long time ago that survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about staying human. Captain, I must ask, what are your people's intentions regarding the broader galactic situation? The hegemony will undoubtedly respond to this defeat with overwhelming force. There was a pause before Chen answered, and when she did, her voice carried a weight that seemed to encompass not just her own determination, but that of her entire species. Commander, humans have a saying, evil triumphs when good people do nothing. We've been watching the hegemony systematically murder entire civilizations, while the galaxy debates response protocols and calculates acceptable losses. We're done watching. You're declaring war on the hegemony?
The entire hegemony?
No, Commander. We're declaring war on the idea that innocent beings should die while others stand by and do nothing about it.
If the hegemony wants to be the face of that idea, then yes, we're going to war with them. As Zethkar processed this response, he realized that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. For centuries, conflicts had been fought over territory, resources, or political advantage. The humans were proposing something entirely different. A war fought over principles. And as he watched their evacuation operations continue with relentless efficiency, he began to understand that these beings might actually be capable of winning such a war. The myths were not only real, they were angry, they were organized, and they were absolutely committed to a fight that was going to reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare, survival, and the price of standing up to overwhelming odds. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kepler, 442, the galaxy found itself divided into 3 distinct camps: those who sided with humanity, those who remained loyal to the hegemony through fear or calculation, and those who desperately tried to maintain neutrality in what was rapidly becoming the largest conflict in recorded galactic history. The hegemony's response had been swift and brutal. Supreme Commander Vextar led a massive fleet of 127 vessels in a direct assault on the Rigel system, home to 8.3 million beings across 4 inhabited worlds. Intelligence indicated that human forces had established a defensive position there, and the hegemony intended to make an example that would discourage further resistance. What they found instead was the most sophisticated defensive network ever constructed. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display aboard the Indomitable as the hegemony fleet emerged from jump space directly into a carefully prepared kill zone. The humans had learned much from their first engagement, and they had spent 3 weeks turning the Rigel system into a fortress that would have impressed military engineers from any era. All stations, this is Admiral Chen. The hegemony has arrived in greater numbers than anticipated, but our preparations are complete. Execute Plan Gamma. The space around Rigel Prime suddenly filled with previously invisible defensive platforms, each one bristling with weapons that immediately began tracking the incoming hegemony vessels. Minefield networks that had been disguised as asteroid debris activated, creating corridors of destruction that channeled the enemy fleet toward predetermined kill zones. But the most shocking surprise was the appearance of allied vessels from 17 different species, all coordinated under human tactical command. Commander Zethkar aboard the Vigilance felt his heart racing as his ship, now officially designated as part of the Allied fleet, received targeting data for the engagement. Around him, Vorthan crew members who had trained their entire lives for defensive warfare found themselves preparing to go on the offensive for the first time in their species' history. All Allied vessels, this is Admiral Chen. You know your assignments. Remember, we're not here to win a battle. We're here to send a message that will be heard across the galaxy. Today, 47 conquered worlds are watching to see if resistance is possible. The battle that followed redefined military tactics for an entire generation of warriors. The hegemony fleet, confident in their numerical superiority, advanced in standard formation toward what appeared to be a modest human defense force. Supreme Commander Vextar had learned from his previous defeat and positioned his ships to maximize overlapping fields of fire while minimizing the humans' apparent advantage in maneuverability. The first indication that this battle would be different came when the human defensive platforms opened fire at ranges that exceeded anything in hegemony tactical manuals. Energy beams that should have dissipated harmlessly in the vacuum of space struck hegemony shields with devastating accuracy, causing multiple system failures across the advancing fleet. How were they achieving target lock at this distance? Vextar demanded of his tactical officer. Unit 847 cybernetic implants flickered as it processed the incoming data. Unknown targeting technology, Supreme Commander. The energy patterns suggest the use of exotic particles that ignore standard countermeasures. But the true shock came when the Allied fleet revealed itself. Vorthan vessels that had been hiding in the shadow of the planet suddenly accelerated beyond their documented performance specifications, their weapon systems upgraded with human technology that tripled their effective firepower. Zentari cruisers emerged from stealth fields that shouldn't have been possible with their known technology, their hulls bristling with missile systems that fired projectiles at velocities approaching light speed. The Catharan contingent, 3 heavy destroyers from a species known for their defensive mindset, had somehow been transformed into aggressive strike vessels that moved with predatory grace through the hegemony formation. Supreme Commander, Unit 847 reported, enemy fleet strength is significantly higher than intelligence estimates. We are detecting 43 vessels of various classifications, all displaying enhanced capabilities beyond known specifications. Vextar studied the tactical display with growing unease. Enhanced capabilities? The Allied vessels appear to have been fitted with human technology. Power output, weapon effectiveness, and defensive capabilities all exceed baseline parameters by factors ranging from 200 to 400%. How is such integration possible? Different species use completely incompatible technologies. The answer came in the form of a devastating demonstration. The Vorthan vessel Vigilance, previously armed with standard plasma weapons suitable for patrol duties, suddenly unleashed a barrage of energy that punched through a hegemony cruiser's shields as if they didn't exist. The enemy vessel's hull buckled and collapsed under the impact of weapons that shouldn't have been able to scratch its armor. Commander Zethkar stared at his tactical display in amazement. Kesra, what just happened to our weapons? Sir, the human technicians made modifications to our plasma couplings that I don't fully understand. They said something about harmonically tuned energy frequencies and quantum-entangled targeting systems. The result appears to be weapons that are specifically designed to penetrate hegemony defensive systems. They weaponized our ships specifically to fight the hegemony? More than that, sir. They seem to have redesigned our entire fleet to exploit specific weaknesses in hegemony technology. Every ship, every weapon, every defensive system has been optimized for this particular enemy. The battle raged for 2 hours and 17 minutes, but the outcome became clear within the first 30 minutes. The hegemony fleet, despite its numerical superiority, found itself systematically outmaneuvered, outgunned, and most importantly, outthought. Human tactical doctrine proved to be unlike anything the hegemony had encountered. Instead of the traditional approach of matching force against force, the humans coordinated their allied fleets to create tactical situations where the enemy's strengths became weaknesses. When hegemony dreadnoughts concentrated their fire on human capital ships, Vorthan vessels used their enhanced speed to attack the dreadnoughts' flanks. When the enemy fleet attempted to reposition to counter this threat, Zentari stealth ships emerged from concealment to target critical support vessels. Every move the hegemony made was anticipated and countered by coordinated responses from species that had never fought together before. Admiral Chen observed the battle from the bridge of the Indomitable, but her attention was divided between the immediate tactical situation and the broader strategic implications. "Communications," she called out. "Patch me through to all Allied commanders. Channel open, Admiral. All Allied vessels. This is Chen." You're all performing beyond expectations. But remember, this isn't just about winning this battle. Every government, every military command, and every civilian population in the galaxy is watching what we do here today. We're not just fighting for Rigel. We're fighting to prove that the hegemony can be beaten by species working together. The response came from Commander Zethkar aboard the Vigilance. "Admiral Chen, this is Zethkar. Speaking for the Vorthan contingent, we understand. Our children will learn of this day." Similar acknowledgements came from the commanders of each allied species, and Chen felt a moment of satisfaction. 3 weeks ago, most of these beings had never heard of humanity. Today, they were fighting alongside human forces as if they had trained together for years. The key to the rapid integration had been humanity's approach to alliance building. Instead of demanding submission or compliance with human methods, human engineers and tacticians had worked to understand each species' natural advantages and then develop ways to enhance those advantages while compensating for weaknesses. The Vorthans were naturally cautious and methodical, so human technology enhanced their sensor systems and defensive capabilities while providing weapons that could strike accurately at extreme ranges. The Zentari were natural scouts and infiltrators, so human stealth technology was adapted to their existing systems to create ships that were nearly impossible to detect. The Kitharans were defensive specialists, so their vessels were equipped with point defense systems that could protect entire formations while still contributing significant offensive firepower. Each species fought according to their strengths, but those strengths had been amplified beyond anything they could have achieved independently. As the battle reached its climax, Supreme Commander Vexstar faced the unthinkable reality of a second consecutive defeat. His fleet had been reduced to 67 vessels, with critical damage to most of the survivors. The Allied fleet had sustained losses, but their coordinated tactics and superior technology had minimized casualties while maximizing effectiveness. Supreme Commander, Unit 847 reported, "Recommend immediate withdrawal. Current tactical situation is untenable." "No." Vexstar's mandibles clicked with determination. "Signal all ships. Concentrate fire on the human flagship. If we can eliminate their command vessel, their coordination will collapse." The remaining hegemony forces began converging on the Indomitable, bringing overwhelming firepower to bear on the human dreadnought. For several minutes, it appeared that Vexstar's desperate strategy might succeed. Then the Allied fleet demonstrated the true power of coordinated warfare. Every ship in the Allied formation immediately moved to intercept the attacks on the Indomitable. Vorthan vessels positioned themselves to absorb incoming fire with their enhanced defensive systems. Zentari ships emerged from stealth to target the weapon systems of the attacking vessels. Kitharan destroyers established point defense networks that created an almost impenetrable barrier around the human flagship, but it was the response from the human ships that truly shattered hegemony morale. Instead of withdrawing their flagship from danger, the human fleet used the concentrated enemy attack as an opportunity to bring their own ships into point-blank range. The Indomitable, surrounded by Allied vessels and absorbing devastating firepower, continued to fight with undiminished intensity, while human destroyers and cruisers carved through the hegemony formation like predators attacking prey. The final moment of the battle came when Admiral Chen broadcast a message on all frequencies. Supreme Commander Vexstar, this is Admiral Chen. Your fleet is defeated, your tactics are obsolete, and your reign of terror is ending. I'm giving you 30 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures before we stop accepting surrenders. The silence that followed lasted exactly 29 seconds before the surviving hegemony vessels initiated emergency jump protocols. As the enemy fleet disappeared into jump space, Commander Zefkar found himself staring at tactical displays that showed something unprecedented in galactic history. A multi-species fleet that had achieved total tactical coordination in its first major engagement. Sir, Kesra reported, casualty reports are coming in from all Allied vessels. Total losses, 7 ships destroyed, 14 with moderate damage. Enemy losses, 60 vessels destroyed or disabled. Zefkar was quiet for a moment, contemplating what they had just witnessed. Kesra, send a message to Vorthan High Command. Tell them that everything we thought we knew about warfare just changed. Tell them the humans have shown us a new way to fight. What should I tell them about the humans themselves, sir? Zefkar watched as human medical vessels moved among the Allied fleet, providing assistance to damaged ships regardless of species. He watched human engineers coordinating repairs using techniques adapted for different technologies. He watched human commanders maintaining perfect coordination across 17 different species and command structures. Tell them, tactical officer, that the myths weren't just true. Tell them that the myths were understatements. 6 months after the Battle of Rigel Prime, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable from the orderly hierarchy that the hegemony had maintained for 3 centuries. The Allied fleet now numbered over 400 vessels from 31 different species, while the hegemony had been forced to consolidate their forces in their core systems, fighting a defensive war for the first time in their history. But the most significant change was not measured in ships or battles. It was measured in hope. On worlds that had lived under the shadow of hegemony conquest for generations, beings who had never dared to resist began to remember what freedom felt like. Resistance movements emerged on occupied planets, coordinated through human intelligence networks and supplied with weapons designed specifically to exploit hegemony vulnerabilities. The psychological impact was devastating to hegemony control. Their entire system of governance had been built on the absolute certainty that resistance was futile. When that certainty crumbled, their empire began to collapse from within. Fleet Admiral Marcus Thompson stood in the command center beneath the Colorado Mountains, studying a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy that showed the current strategic situation. Red zones indicated hegemony-controlled space, blue zones showed Allied territory, and the expanding green areas represented liberated worlds where local governments had expelled hegemony forces. Admiral, reported Colonel Kim, long-range reconnaissance confirms that the hegemony has withdrawn all remaining forces to the Omega Centauri cluster. Intelligence estimates suggest they have approximately 180 vessels concentrated around their primary command facility. Thompson nodded grimly. Their final stronghold. They're going to make their last stand at the seat of their power. Sir, tactical analysis suggests this will be their most defensible position. The Omega Centauri cluster is surrounded by natural gravitational anomalies that limit approach vectors, and they've had 6 months to construct defensive installations. Colonel, they've also had 6 months to watch their empire collapse, while we've had 6 months to perfect our coordination with 31 different species. More importantly, we've had 6 months to understand exactly what we're fighting for. Thompson activated the communication system that would reach every Allied vessel in the galaxy. This is Fleet Admiral Thompson, to all Allied commanders. The time has come for the final phase of operations. The hegemony has consolidated their remaining forces at Omega Centauri. We will end this war where it began, with overwhelming force applied in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. The response came from Admiral Chen aboard the Indomitable, currently positioned in the Vorthan home system. Admiral Thompson, 3rd Fleet is ready. All Allied contingents report full operational status. Similar confirmations came from fleet commanders throughout Allied space. Admiral Sarah Kim commanding the 5th Fleet from Centauri Prime. Admiral James Rodriguez leading the 7th Fleet from the liberated Kithaeron colonies. Commander Zethkar, recently promoted to Admiral, coordinating the Vorthan Defense Fleet from his new flagship, the Determination. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. Fleet Admiral Thompson, this is Ambassador Kethtar of the former hegemony colony of Beta Centauri. The liberated worlds wish to contribute to the final operation. Thompson paused, considering the implications. Ambassador, the liberated worlds have already contributed more than we could have hoped. Your intelligence networks and resistance movements have been invaluable. With respect, Admiral, that is not enough. The beings of the liberated worlds have lived under hegemony oppression for generations. We request the right to participate directly in their final defeat. Ambassador, the final battle will be unlike anything we've faced. The hegemony will be fighting for their survival with everything they have. Admiral Thompson, that is precisely why we must be there. Not as observers, not as support personnel, but as combatants. Our children need to know that when the hegemony fell, we were not rescued. We participated in our own liberation. The silence that followed was broken by Admiral Chen's voice. Admiral Thompson, I recommend we accept the ambassador's request. If this war has taught us anything, it's that freedom is something you have to fight for yourself. Thompson was quiet for a moment, considering not just the tactical implications, but the broader meaning of what they were about to attempt. Very well. Ambassador Kethtar, organize your forces. All available vessels from the liberated worlds are welcome to join the Allied fleet. 3 weeks later, the largest military formation in galactic history assembled at the edge of the Omega Centauri cluster. The Allied fleet now numbered 847 vessels from 43 different species, including 123 ships crewed by beings from worlds that had been liberated during the 6-month campaign. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical displays that showed the hegemony's final defensive positions. The enemy had constructed a network of defensive platforms, minefields, and automated weapon systems that would have been impregnable under conventional attack methods. Fortunately, human military doctrine had never been particularly conventional. Communications, patch me through to all Allied commanders. Channel open, Admiral. All Allied forces. This is Admiral Chen. Before we begin the final operation, I want everyone to understand what we're attempting today. We're not just ending a war, we're ending 3 centuries of systematic oppression. We're proving that beings from dozens of different worlds, with different technologies, different cultures, and different ways of thinking, can work together to defend what matters most. She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew, beings who 6 months ago had been preparing to fight a war that military analysts said they couldn't win. The hegemony built their empire on the belief that resistance was futile, that superior force would always triumph over courage and determination. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that there is no force in the universe more powerful than free beings fighting for their freedom. The attack began with a demonstration of coordination that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Instead of a single massive assault, the Allied fleet executed 17 simultaneous operations designed to overwhelm the hegemony's defensive systems through tactical complexity rather than brute force. Vorthan vessels, their sensors enhanced with human technology, identified and targeted the command nodes that coordinated the defensive networks. Centauri stealth ships penetrated the outer perimeter to place precision charges on critical infrastructure. Kithaeron destroyers established point defense networks that protected the assault forces from automated weapon systems, and throughout the operation, ships crewed by beings from the liberated worlds fought alongside the vessels that had participated in their liberation, creating a symbolic unity that transcended military necessity. The hegemony's response was everything Admiral Chen had expected and more. Their remaining forces fought with the desperation of beings who knew that defeat meant the end of everything they had built. Energy weapons that could shatter planets were brought to bear on individual Allied vessels. Defensive systems that had protected their core worlds for centuries were pushed beyond their design limits. But they faced an enemy that had learned to think beyond the conventional limits of warfare. Supreme Commander Vextar, commanding the hegemony's final fleet from his flagship the Absolute Authority, watched his tactical displays with growing disbelief, as Allied forces seemed to anticipate and counter every defensive measure. How are they coordinating such complex operations across so many different command structures? He demanded of Unit 847. Unknown, Supreme Commander. The enemy fleet appears to be operating as a single organism despite consisting of vessels from 43 different species. This level of coordination should be impossible. The truth was both simpler and more complex than Vextar could have understood. The humans had not imposed their command structure on their allies. Instead, they had created a network that allowed each species to contribute according to their strengths while sharing information and coordinating objectives in real time. Every Vorthan sensor array fed data to Zentari stealth ships, which passed targeting information to Kithran weapon systems, which provided fire support for human assault vessels, which coordinated with liberated world forces to achieve tactical objectives that none of them could have accomplished independently. The battle raged for 7 hours and 43 minutes, longer than any single engagement in the war. But the outcome was never truly in doubt. The hegemony's defensive positions were systematically dismantled by forces that approached each obstacle as a puzzle to be solved, rather than a barrier to be overcome. The final moments came, when Admiral Chen led a combined assault on the absolute authority itself. The Indomitable, escorted by ships from 6 different species, penetrated the heart of the hegemony formation and engaged the enemy flagship in single combat. Supreme Commander Vexstar, Chen broadcast on all frequencies, "This is Admiral Chen. I'm prepared to accept your unconditional surrender." The response was immediate and final. Never. The hegemony does not surrender. Then the hegemony ends today. What followed was not a battle but an execution. 6 months of technological advancement, tactical innovation, and most importantly, moral certainty combined to overwhelm the last symbol of hegemony power. The absolute authority, despite being one of the most advanced warships ever constructed, found itself unable to match the coordinated assault of beings fighting for something beyond their own survival. When the enemy flagship finally exploded, the shockwave was felt throughout the galaxy, not just as a physical phenomenon, but as a psychological liberation that freed entire civilizations from centuries of fear. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, surrounded by her crew and watching the tactical displays that showed the end of the hegemony fleet. Around them, Allied vessels from 43 different worlds celebrated in 43 different ways, creating a symphony of victory that spoke to the diversity of the coalition that had achieved the impossible. "Communications," she called out. "Open a channel to all Allied forces and broadcast on all galactic frequencies. Channel open, Admiral." To all beings throughout the galaxy, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. The hegemony has been defeated. Their fleets are destroyed, their command structure has collapsed, and their reign of terror is over. She paused, considering the magnitude of what they had accomplished. But more importantly, we have proven something that will echo through history. We have proven that freedom is not something that can be given or taken away by others. It is something that exists whenever beings are willing to stand together and fight for it. The message that propagated across the galaxy that day was heard by beings who had lived their entire lives under oppression, by species who had never known what it meant to choose their own destiny, and by countless individuals who had dreamed of a day when the galaxy might be free. Commander Zethkar, now Admiral Zethkar, sat on the bridge of his flagship and watched human vessels begin coordinating the liberation of the final hegemony worlds. Around him, his crew, beings who 6 months ago had been trained only for defensive patrol duties, worked with the confidence of veterans who had helped reshape the galaxy. "Sir," reported his tactical officer. "Message from Admiral Chen. She's requesting a meeting of all Allied commanders to discuss the post-war organization of liberated space." Zethkar smiled, an expression that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago, when the hegemony had seemed invincible. "Tell Admiral Chen that the Vorthan fleet will be honored to participate. And Kesra?" "Yes, sir." "Send a message to Vorthan Prime. Tell them that the myths were real, that they fought alongside us, and that the galaxy is free because beings from dozens of worlds chose to stand together against impossible odds." As the Allied fleets began the long process of establishing peace in a galaxy that had known only war, one truth became clear to every observer. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had taught the galaxy how to conquer itself. The myths were real, they were powerful, and they had kept their promise. They never gave up, they never left anyone behind, and they never stopped fighting for what was right. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of freedom had begun.